The entire restaurant went silent when the billionaire CEO slid a single white envelope across the table and laughed. He had just offered a young waitress $1 million to read a letter in front of his closest executives, expecting her to stumble over the words and become the evening's entertainment. But when she finally looked down at the page, her hands stopped shaking. She read the first sentence, lifted her eyes, and quietly said something that made the CEO's smile disappear completely. What none of them knew was that the letter was not a test of her intelligence. It was a message from the one person the powerful man had spent years trying to forget. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness can change a person's life and that everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy. Sometimes, the person we overlook today becomes the person who teaches us the greatest lesson tomorrow. It was a bright Tuesday afternoon at the prestigious Belmont Grand, a restaurant where sunlight poured through enormous glass windows and made the crystal chandeliers sparkle even before evening arrived. The dining room was being prepared for an important private luncheon. Men in tailored suits discussed investments over expensive coffee while assistants hurried between tables carrying folders and phones. In the middle of all that wealth and confidence moved a young waitress named Maribel Rowan, quietly doing her job. She wore a simple cream-colored blouse, a navy apron, and a small silver watch that had belonged to her late mother. Unlike everyone else around her, Maribel did not seem impressed by money. She had learned long ago that money could buy comfort, but it could not buy peace. Maribel had been working at Belmont for nearly 2 years. She was 26, reserved, hardworking, and almost painfully polite. She lived in a tiny apartment with her younger brother, who was recovering from an accident that had left him unable to work. Every morning before coming to the restaurant, Maribel prepared his breakfast, checked his medication schedule, and left instructions beside the refrigerator. She worked extra shifts whenever she could, saving every dollar for his physical therapy. Nobody at Belmont knew how difficult her life was because Maribel never complained. She believed that hardship was something you carried quietly when the people you loved were depending on you. That afternoon, the restaurant manager suddenly announced that the private dining room had been reserved by Everett Vale, one of the most powerful businessmen in the city. Everett was known for building a technology empire from nothing and becoming a billionaire before the age of 45. He was intelligent, charming when he wanted to be, and ruthless when he did not. Several executives from his company arrived with him, along with investors and lawyers. They filled the private dining room with expensive watches, polished shoes, confident laughter, and the kind of arrogance that came from knowing almost every door in the city would open when they approached it. Maribel was assigned to serve their table. At first, everything went smoothly. She poured water, served appetizers, replaced glasses, and moved quietly enough that the guests barely noticed her. But when Everett dropped a folded letter beside his plate, Maribel instinctively picked it up and handed it back to him. He stared at her for several seconds before asking whether she could read English. Maribel said yes. One of his executives laughed, and Everett smiled as though he had suddenly thought of a game. He picked up the letter and held it between 2 fingers. Then, with the confidence of a man who had never been embarrassed in public, he told Maribel that he would pay her $1 million if she could read the entire letter aloud without making a mistake. The room erupted in laughter. Everyone understood that it was a joke. Everett expected her to become nervous, perhaps mispronounce a difficult word, and give them something to laugh about. Maribel looked at the envelope, then at Everett. Her first instinct was to refuse. She hated being the center of attention. But $1 million could change her brother's life. It could pay for his treatment, his rehabilitation, their rent, and perhaps give them a future without constantly calculating which bill could wait another week. So she accepted. The room became strangely quiet as Everett placed the letter in front of her. Maribel unfolded it carefully. The paper was old, yellowed around the edges, and covered with handwriting that looked almost faded by time. She took a breath and began reading. The first line made her heart stop. It said, "Everett, if you are reading this, then you finally became the man I always hoped you would become." The smile vanished from Everett's face. Maribel continued reading, unaware that everyone at the table was now staring at him. The letter had been written by a woman named Celeste Vale, Everett's mother. It spoke about a little boy who once shared a bedroom with his younger brother, a boy who dreamed of becoming someone who could help people. It described Everett before money, before success, before corporate towers and private jets. It described a frightened child who once promised his mother that if he ever became rich, he would never allow another family to suffer because they could not afford medical care. Then the letter reached a sentence that changed everything. Celeste wrote that Everett's younger brother, Jonah, had not died because his illness was impossible to treat. He had died because their family could not afford the treatment available at the time. She wrote that she hoped Everett would remember the pain of those years and use his success to protect people who stood where their family had once stood. Maribel's voice became softer as she continued. The letter explained that Celeste had secretly established a small charitable fund before she died. She had left instructions that Everett should expand it when he became wealthy enough. But Everett had never done so. Somewhere between building his empire and fighting for control of his company, he had buried the memory of his childhood. He had stopped speaking about Jonah. He had stopped visiting his mother's old neighborhood. He had convinced himself that weakness was something successful people could not afford. Maribel reached the final paragraph. Celeste had written one last request: "If you ever meet someone struggling the way we once struggled, do not ask what they can give you. Ask what you can give them." Maribel lowered the letter. Nobody moved. Everett stared at her as though he had never seen her before. The executives who had been laughing minutes earlier were suddenly uncomfortable. One woman lowered her eyes. Another quietly placed her phone on the table. Then Maribel did something nobody expected. She placed the letter in front of Everett and told him that she did not want his $1 million. Everett asked why. Maribel explained that she had accepted his challenge because she needed money, but after reading the letter, she realized that the $1 million belonged somewhere else. She told him about her brother, not asking for anything, simply explaining that she understood what it felt like to watch someone you love suffer while you counted every dollar. She then said that his mother had not written that letter so he could become more powerful. She had written it so he would remember who he was before the power. Everett's eyes filled with tears. For the first time in years, the billionaire who could command entire companies looked completely helpless. He admitted that he had found the letter months earlier among his mother's belongings but had been too afraid to read it. He had brought it to the restaurant that afternoon because he intended to destroy it after dinner. The challenge had been nothing more than a cruel joke to distract himself from the guilt he carried. But Maribel had read it. And she had understood it. Everett asked about her brother. Maribel hesitated before answering. She said his name was Silas Rowan, that he had been recovering slowly, and that the medical bills were becoming impossible. Everett did not make another joke. He stood from his chair, walked to Maribel, and handed her the envelope containing the $1 million promise. He told her it was no longer a bet. It was the first donation to the medical foundation he was going to create in his mother's name. Maribel tried to refuse again, but Everett told her that accepting help was not weakness. Sometimes, he said, allowing someone to help you gave them the chance to become better too. That afternoon changed more than Maribel's life. Within months, Everett established the Celeste Vale Foundation, focusing on medical assistance for families who could not afford life-changing treatment. He funded rehabilitation centers, emergency medical grants, and scholarships for children from struggling families. But perhaps the most important change happened inside him. He began visiting his mother's old neighborhood. He started speaking about Jonah again. He stopped measuring people by their clothing, jobs, or bank accounts. And Maribel? She continued working at Belmont for several months before Everett offered her a position managing community outreach for the new foundation. She accepted, not because she wanted to escape being a waitress, but because she had discovered something she had never realized before. Her quietness was not weakness. Her kindness was not weakness. Her difficult life had not made her less valuable. It had taught her how to see pain in other people. Years later, when Maribel stood before hundreds of families receiving help from the foundation, she kept one small piece of paper framed behind her desk. It was not the $1 million check. It was not a photograph of Everett. It was a copy of Celeste's final sentence. If you ever meet someone struggling the way we once struggled, do not ask what they can give you. Ask what you can give them. Maribel never forgot the day a billionaire tried to embarrass a waitress for entertainment and accidentally gave her the opportunity to change his life. And Everett never forgot the woman who refused to take his money until he understood what his mother had truly been asking him to do. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes people can change, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind us that compassion can reach places money never can. Special request, comment, kindness is always worth more than money, if you believe one good heart can inspire another. Because sometimes, the person standing quietly in the corner of the room is carrying a story powerful enough to bring an entire room to silence. And sometimes, the greatest fortune a person can receive is not $1 million, but the chance to become human again.